like to introduce Barney Bush. He is Shawnee and a Cayuga poet and indigenous activist. Barney Bush was born in Harrod, Illinois. He earned a BA at Fort Lewis College and an MA in English and Fine Arts at the University of Idaho. Barney took nature, family, and his Native American heritage as subject matter. His collections of poetry include By Duke Process, 2004, Petroglyphs, 1982. NATO Records recorded several of his musical and spoken word performances, including Left for Dead, Prisoners of the American Dream, 1994. Several anthologies, including Harper's Anthology of 20th Century Native American Poetry, 1988, and Songs from This Earth on Turtle's Back, Contemporary American Indian Poetry in 1983, have featured his work. Barney is a member of the Society of Artists, Composers, and Editors of Music. His honors include a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. He helped establish the Institute of Southern Plains, a Cheyenne Indian school located in Oklahoma, and helped many universities develop Native American studies programs. He taught at the Institute of American Indian and Alaska Native Culture and serves as chair of the Council of the Vineyard Indian Settlement. Barney currently lives and works on his ancestral homelands in southern Illinois. Please, everybody, welcome.
Bison niti nitiwak. Nalak Koshidi Dama Barney Bush, Makwa Mako Ietson, and I'm not a fluent speaker of my language. But I am a citizen of the Kishbakofa Shawnee of southeastern Illinois. We're part of Sadowan's band of Shawnees who in 1810 came across the Wabash River several times to avoid the colonial militia. And part of our band left in the early 1800s and now is the Shawnee tribe. There's 3 Shawnee tribes in Oklahoma. One is now the Shawnee tribe of Miami, Oklahoma, and who has a hard time with recognizing who we are. And it's okay because we had people who came back and forth and visited here up until my great-grandfather died in 1953. And so we still know people there, but we have the Vineyard Indian Settlement has a lot of political enemies. And if one thinks of political enemies as people who are imprinted with a certain kind of racism in the Americas that doesn't seem like it should be happening here, but it does. And it happens in more ways than I can express. We have newspaper people, we have all kinds of people who have said some terrible things about us, but you know, you say terrible things, you just have to say them. There's nothing I can do to stop you, you know, and all we can do is say, oh, that's not true. But about us, we are here and we're mentioned in historical records, barely mentioned, but we're mentioned enough that satisfies the Anglo population that doesn't understand who we are. So they see it and they say, oh, well, I guess they were here. What I'd like to do before I get started on talking about 3 main issues here tonight, one of them is the Saline Valley that is being stripped. I would like to talk about the word sociopath. I would like to talk about our homelands. Before we start, I'd like to invite those folks from South Dakota. Now, I didn't get it. Are you guys from Pine Ridge?
Well, actually, we're not even from South Dakota.
Where are you?
Actually, I'm from South Dakota. She's from South Dakota. My Aunt Corinne's from South Dakota. I'm from Arizona. And we have from New Mexico and San Felipe.
Would you come forward?
Standing together for everything and everyone that is the destruction of our lands, our sacred sites, and our sacred people. And because of that, I'm going to have our own song from our Hopi Reservation to you all.
When I was a kid, growing up here down along the Saline River bottoms, my chums, cousins, generally all the folks around there I was related to. And we were little Tarzans growing up down there. We had grapevines and we had all kinds of things that made us, and we had horses, and we had a pretty good time hanging out in the hills and swinging on grapevines and going hunting. My father and his brothers were all hunters and fishers, and that's how we got by. That's how we fed ourselves. And we had gardens. We had large gardens. And it seems odd to me now, as a guy that's a little older than 39, I think about how the gardens played such an important part in our lives, and with my grandparents and great-grandparents, and we all had certain crops that we raised that we swapped off on when it came to drying or canning or whatever it was that in order to preserve the food. But one of the things that we kids got used to were the hills and the rivers and the creeks. And at that time, you could swim in the rivers and the waters, and you could see in them, you could see under the water. And it wasn't long, I was about 12, 13, the strip mines moved into our part of the world over there on the Saline River. And all those familiar hills, all those familiar places where we had played and rode our horses and all of that, within 3 years were gone. Forever. Leveled. Forever. Everything that was a part of my kinship in growing up visually in the land was gone forever. And to this day, when I see those coal trucks going past my house down by Herod, even when I see the big trucks taking the last of the big grandfathers, the timber from the forest, big trees, that hurts. That hurts in a way that probably, I hate to say this, but probably only other natives or environmentalists can understand how that hurts, because I think that everyone here is attached somehow or another to the sanctity of the earth. There is something holy about it, and you know it. You feel it. It's in your eyes, it's in your heart, and it's in your voice. And to just say simply that I feel this way because I'm native is not true. I feel this way because I am a human being who was raised by the forest, who was raised by the lightning and the thunder and the rainwater and the wind. People say that maybe sounds odd to say that you were raised that way, or in proper English, reared that way. No, it's not odd at all. Those were my ancestors. Those are my relatives now as we speak. They were my influences when I was a kid. Yes, we were forced into going to, when my grandfather became a Christian when I was about 6 years old, we had the church introduced into our lives. And that was a strange thing because it introduced a new kind of fear into our lives, a new kind of logic, a new kind of attachment to the colonial culture. And in my family, we were never that close to the colonial culture, although we protected ourselves. We protected each other as much as we could. But we still had to go to the schools. The state required it. And I can say now that there was always 1 or 2 kids that were never sent to schools. There was 1 or 2 kids that always had some of the culture that stayed with them at home. So there was that, I don't know what that racket is, but there was always that element of knowing that something is wrong with this whole culture of being, you know, from the Columbus fantasy of the late 1400s to the present. There's something wrong. And what's wrong is that about 5 years ago, I learned the word sociopath for the first time, what a sociopath truly is. And do you know that most sociopaths, as pathologists have discovered, are people who are born without a conscience? Now, wrap your heads around this. Born without a conscience. Don't forget that. Whether it's the politics, I can no longer just be angry with the man or the woman in Washington who does the kinds of things that they do, who murders people randomly or destroys the earth. Those people are acting without conscience. People say, well, they're greedy. They're acting without conscience. They have no conscience. How do you deal with someone who doesn't have a conscience? How do you deal with that factor of human being that does not have a conscience? There was this woman who wrote a book called The Sociopath Next Door. Dr. Martha Stout, I believe is her name. And she estimated back then that about 1 in, I think, 9 or 1 in 19 people is a sociopath. It's much more than that. She hasn't seen it from the Native American perspective. The sociopaths have been here, have come in mass since the boatload of Spanish Catholics and Spanish Jews came across with Columbus in 1492, and the Great Murder, as Padre de las Casas wrote in his journals, that he estimated that between the first 9 months of the occupation, that approximately 3 to 8 million people lost their lives because of that, because of murder and the lack of conscience. How do you slaughter people like that? How do you murder them? How do you throw them overboard to the sharks? People in this country, in colonial countries in particular, have been throwing the indigenous people to the sharks for a long time. Have been doing that sort of thing to our homelands, throwing our homeland to the sharks of industry, to the sharks of chainsaws and new machines that can take a forest down in just no time at all. And yes, people kill indigenous people. There's a thing in the colonial society that has this murder penchant for women. Don't ask me exactly what it is, because it's without conscience when it happens. The person that does that, you can be angry with them all you want, but you're being angry with this desk. You're being angry with the pole in the ceiling. You're being angry with chairs. You're being angry with vessels, basically, that have no conscience. And when you get home tonight, those of you who have your computers with you, look it up. You'll find different stories of this world without conscience. You'll find different studies that are done on these things. Primarily, it's without conscience. As we go along in this world here, yes, at the time the strip miners destroyed my homeland, you know what I wanted to do then? I wanted to kill them. They did, in my estimation, people who did that to the land and to the water and to the air and to human beings did not have the same rights to life that my relatives did, who lived off of that. That was then, this is now. But I had no alternative then. And yes, we used to go down and destroy their equipment when I was about 12, 13 years old. And we shot 22s into their equipment, and we tried to blow things up. They had a kind of dynamite there that we would steal boxes of that dynamite and try to blow up equipment with it by building fires and throwing it in there. But that was the kind of dynamite that you have to have an electrical charge for. We were too naive to know that. We thought, dynamite that won't blow up in fire? But we would probably have blown our heads off if we had were able to succeed at setting off this fire. But there's a thing about dealing with sociopaths, or people who don't care. You know, we hear down in my part of the country, people who work with the strip mines, one of their favorite phrases, well, I'm going to put milk and bread on the table for my kids. And every time I hear that, I just hear a click in my head, you know, and the pulling of a trigger when someone says that. But it's just in my head. And I think, how dare you say something like that, to use your kids as a cover for your own lack of conscience? Because that's what sociopaths do. And you can be a man or a woman. And sociopaths are real prone to show up in places like in government, in education, in religion. What's another famous place that sociopaths? What's that? Of course. What was I thinking? How come I didn't mention them first? Well, look at, you know, it should be a testament to your own knowledge to see that people like this is that are in control of what's going on in this world. As many African people, not just the Africans, but other tribal peoples and other Anglo peoples have also suffered at the hands of those sociopaths. But they've got something out for black people. It's incredible, the numbers of black people that they hold down onto the ground and shoot them. You know, it's like let's all make war on black people. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from the history, and it comes from people's fear of not having a sense of belonging. When I'm talking with environmentalists, I'm talking to people, and I say to them, as I say in the welcome to you here tonight, anyone who loves my homeland as much as I do is my brother and sister. Anyone who loves it. You don't love my homeland as much as I do, you are my enemy. And I love to gather around people who have a sense of knowing how to deal with enemies. And protests don't really do it. You can carry signs all day long. You know, and the coal companies in St. Louis or wherever, they don't give a damn about your protests out there on the streets. They don't care about, you know, you can put tens of thousands of people in the streets. And some of you will come up later and tell me something that was successful in some kind of protest. But what really blows the colonial folks backwards is dealing with their money. That's the only thing that works with them. You know, in their computers or their board of trustees or whatever it is. The only thing you can really do is mess them up on computer. As far as I can see. You know, if you got wiser ways. You know, I'm at the age now where you can't really ask me to, you know, run up a strip mine bank or make a raid on a coal mine or something like that. I don't have that energy in me anymore. I don't have the physical energy. I've got the mental energy, but not the physical. But yes, I would love to participate in all of that. I would love to have, before I leave this life, cross over and see my ancestors on the other side. I'd love to hear that song. I'd love to hear our family song being sung as I go home. I'd love to hear that. So I think in dealing with all of the things that we deal with here in committees, is the thing that we need to figure out is how to deal with people who do not have a conscience. We keep trying to make politics work around and treating people as if they had somewhere inside of themselves in which they could change. And there might be someone who's willing to change with something. Sociopaths are born that way. So science says. And they don't change. What they do is that, according to Dr. Stout, is that they escape. Like you'll be seeing Trump in the next, it won't be long. He'll probably jump ship. I think he's sociopath and money crazy enough to make a leap here pretty soon, jump overboard. How he'll do it is immaterial to me. But that's what we need to do, is figure out ways that people that control the strip mining, whether it's the Forest Service doing clear cutting, or whether it's the fracking, poisoning the water, people who do those kinds of things need to be dealt with. You can't let a mindless person, we cannot continue to let mindless people poison our water, poison our air, and our earth, and destroy the contours of our land. Under attack now is the Saline River Valley. Over in this part of the world, those of you who grew up here, the Saline River Valley was just totally sacred. Everybody, Saline River Savings and Loans, Saline River this, Saline Valley this, Saline that. Well, now it's Saline Strip Mine. The strip mine that's running from Pearson Hill all the way back over to Bankston Forks and Rocky Branch, that's already been fought over. That's where the strip mine is going. Now you can't even see the hills as you come over Pearson Hill because of the new row of mountains that have been built by the strip mines. And they think if you plant some pine trees or something on it, well, that's good enough. I've had people actually tell me that, oh, the land's much better after it's been stripped. You know, that's another click that goes off in my head. You know, there's lots of clicks. I've written lots of poetry. People ask me about being a poet. I'm not a true poet. My brother Lance Henson, Cheyenne, is a true poet. Published dozens of books of poetry. And he keeps calling me a poet too. No, brother, just because. No, I'm a warrior. When I write a poem, it's an AK-47. That's what I use for bullets, is this poetry. Because I realized a long time ago that, and as far as the American Indian movement is concerned, I was in Minneapolis in 1968. Long-haired, red headband on the streets, up to no good always in those days, but I was there. And did I know the people that were forming the movement then? Of course. A lot of them I was partying with. And as time has come along over here, we've put poetry together. I don't know, you probably know who John Trudell is. That John Trudell is, we fought and argued for years over the difference between militarism and writing poetry. We would argue that, he said, brother, I don't think that's doing us any good. And I said, well, you know, shooting up a Holiday Inn in Durango is not doing us a lot of good either. And we'd get into it, and not, it's been 20 years ago or longer. We were in Paris, and he handed me, we were both on a similar venture. He handed me a fistful of papers, handed them over to him. I said, what's this, your will and testament? And he said, no, just look at it. And it was a selection of poems. It was his first collection of poems. And I thought, wow. I said, here, you're collecting poems, and now I'm collecting bullets. What does this mean? And so we did some programs together there. He published a couple of songs that I wrote, and I've published some things that he is in the background of. And but we never looked at each other in that sort of, we had a common goal. And the common goal was to deal with the fact that we're dealing with people without conscience. And his poetry says it very well. And here in my homeland, we have to deal with a lot of things. We have to deal with people who come in for the wrong reasons. We deal with racists. We deal with people who want to write about us in some kind of historical way, who want to be the first to write some anthropological study on our ancestors or some such shit as that. And you can't tell them anything. We've invited people into our community during our stomp dancers, but we tell them you can't record here. And that infuriates people who come. So we're kind of cutting out newspaper people from our stomp grounds. You can't trust some people. They just can't stomp themselves. Doesn't mean everyone, but So we had a successful reconnection day this weekend. We had a lot of relatives who had never shown up before, and that's our objective, is to bring all those descendants out of the woods of Hardin County and Carver's Ridge to come and identify yourself with your people. And we're doing that now, slowly but surely. And you can't quit. You can't back down. And as far as dealing with visitors coming to our homelands, we welcome visitors. Call first. And, because we still have that idea of, let's boil up, we got some people coming, let's boil up a pot of soup or something for them. And Cade brings her students from her art class, and we always boil up something for them. And they always bring some cake and stuff that's really too good. And I'm on the diabetic end. But we welcome you. You're welcome here in the homelands of the Shawnee people. And there were other tribal people who lived here. There were Kaskaskias, Peorias, Piankashaw, Delawares. Was that a Delaware in the audience? And we welcome you. But it has to be from the heart. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask myself or anyone, then maybe you could, if there's too many questions, my mind probably can't handle them all. I don't have the wherewithal of late night dialogue as I used to have, to be able to stay up all night and hang out with all you hardcore, and well, that's true enough, yeah. And December the 5th, I will have been sober for 39 years. So. And it's that the idea of sobriety it's still something that flashes through my head from time to time. And it's interesting that I'm on a lot of the Indian sites that deal with AA and drug addiction, that sort of thing. And I just hear myself 100 times over in some of the dialogue that some of the folks write in there for help, and it does help people. And would anyone have any questions they'd like to ask me at this time? Yes, sir.
What is empathy?
What is empathy? Empathy is a feeling that you have for someone, or for some occasion, or for a trod-on person, maybe that you kind of feel sorry for them in a way, and it's not so much sorrow all the time, but it's a feeling of understanding the pain, or understanding. Let's leave it at that. It's understanding the pain. To cut out a long lecture, which I can do. Does that answer your question at all? Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
Some people are not born sociopaths or psychopaths, but because of the substances they use and experiences they have develop that, I think their brains become disconnected and they can no longer communicate internally the way they need to be empathetic.
I think you're correct.
Is there a traditional path for healing that?
There are traditional paths for healing. And do I know them all? By no means do I know them all.
Can you describe some of them?
Well, I can do this. Sometimes with people who are having problems with kids, or with their spouses, or with having lost a person in their family, that come to us to want to talk, generally we take them out to our stomp grounds when no one else is there. And there's a place out there on our, what we're calling our land now, that you can set the, and the moment that you come on those grounds, you know you're in a different place. You know that you're in I don't want to get too holy here, but you know that you're in a place of good spirit. It's the best way I can express it. And a lot of people that come there resolve their problems. And almost everyone, without question, after talking for a little while, if there's any discussion at all, sometimes people come and sit and they go to sleep. So there's that. And as far as medicine is concerned, I wouldn't even begin to talk about medicine because there's so much. There's so much stuff that I hear about these days that I'd never heard about when I was growing up. And my grandparents, yeah, they were, collect. In fact, you may have, for those of you who know of Granny Bixby, or Anna Bixby, you've heard of her in this part of the world, the Anna Bixby Center for Battered Women and all that sort of thing. We called her Granny Bixby because she raised one of my grandmothers. She was raised by her. And her sister, Aunt Shawnee, who was a Shawnee woman, of course, was actually the actual mother of the woman that she raised. And she learned a lot of her medicine from Aunt Shawnee, they called her. She's the one who discovered the cure for milk sickness when the pioneers were dying off from drinking milk that was in which cattle had eaten the what?
White snake root.
White snake root. And a lot of those words, in the Shawnee language, I heard a lot of those growing up because they still referred to different plants. Do I remember them all? Hell no, I don't remember all of them. But if somebody uses them or says them, I can reflect on them. It's like speaking the language. I'm not fluent by any means in my own language. But when I'm sometimes up north around the Ojibways or other Delaware people, for our language is so close that sometimes when people are talking, if I'm just listening, I can hear the content of the language. In fact, I was at a Medewan ceremony, it's been a few years back, and I was listening to the Medewan man talk about this person who had died. And I leaned over to my buddy, Richard, who's from Lac du Flambeau, and I said, all right, is he talking Shawnee? And he looked over at me and gave me that look and said, he's speaking Ojibwe. I said, oh, arrogant. He called me an arrogant MF, but I suppose that's true. But I understood what he was saying. I thought, And so over the years, being a kind of a language person, it takes me about 3 weeks to get into someone's language, into the logic of it and how it works, And I was telling a man here from up in the Mohawk country, now living in the Navajo country. Oh yeah, and about how I used that language when I was working in the Navajo country, and how I love messing with the kids in teasing and tormenting them as much as I can, and those kids, when we would be talking about certain areas of science or something or another, and the kids would ask me, Bush, what do you mean when you say metaphysical? And I said, well, it has to do with the origins, where things come from. And he said, well, what does that mean? I said, okay, you forced my hand. Okay, Navajos, pay attention. And I'd write on the board. Now, keep in mind, I'd already talked with the Navajo teacher beforehand, the Navajo language teacher, and I would get 5 or 6 sentences down on a piece of paper that I knew that these kids would come up with. I just knew it. And so one of them was metaphysical. So I wrote on the board, like he taught me, I think it was, if I remember correctly, Hatish binye odinde holodo. Is that right? Yeah. And means what, literally? Means, why are we here? And they said, that's metaphysical. I said, as far as the translation of this word in English is concerned, that's all it is. That's it. I said, you would have been faced with this in school for 10 years, getting a definition from the English teachers or from someone that would confuse you even further. But you get it in your own language and have it interpreted into your own logic, you're going to get it, because it's not that complicated. The sounds of English are complicated. The rules of English are complicated. The origins of English are complicated. You know, and I made my kids memorize all this stuff too. And I even made them listen to Noam Chomsky. I thought anybody can listen to Noam Chomsky and I did. If a kid went to sleep listening to Noam Chomsky, I'd tell them ahead of time, I'm going to shoot you with this water gun. And I said, because some of you will go to sleep. I said, I used to go to sleep, but I knew he had things to say that were something that I wanted to understand. So I about ran out of water one day in the classroom. Kids, the eyes would roll back in their heads, you know, and off they go. And they say, well, Bush, why is this guy important? I said, because he can speak a language right now that you don't. And when you go down to that college in Albuquerque or Denver, wherever it is you decide you're going to go, you're going to be being taught by people who understand this language this way. And when you get down there, I want you to be able to understand it. Else, why not? You know, you don't hear it, you're going to go to sleep on the table because the language is getting, you say it's boring. No, you just don't speak the language the way that English people speak the language. The logic is different. So that's what you're getting here, so wake up and pay attention. Else you'd be going down there and 2 weeks later you'd be bringing that ratty old couch that your mom had out in the front yard back to the reservation. Yeah. So here, yes ma'am.
You said you call it our land. Did you hold on to your land? Did you get it back? And can you say something about the current status of the people who are back on their ancestral land here?
I wish that I had met all of you here before. There was still 40 acres of land left over on High Knob that had not been claimed by the government yet. And it was part of my grandfather's land. They had those vineyards from the Vineyard Indian settlement. The Indian vineyards were not true vineyards at all. They took the name vineyard. There's 5 different groups of vineyards. And they took the name. They're the 5th group that you can't find ancestors for on those computer programs. And that's another thing too you have to watch out for, is that those computer programs are for the most part made to make money. So be careful with those. No, we couldn't raise the money. The guy that had the 40 acres was when he got the 40 acres, his dad had told him, said, if you decide to sell this, donate this back to those Indians. Donate it to the Indians. And he had a heart attack before he was able to make a paper for it. And his wife sold it to some people who came through on condition that they offer it to us before they sold it. Because we got all kinds of people coming from up north that are coming down here to make money off land, what was cheap land. And it's not cheap anymore. And it's gone from, $200 an acre up to $2,000 and $3,000 an acre for land down here in these hills that years ago people didn't even care about. Now, if you can make money off of it in a colonial society, we didn't get the land. We couldn't afford what they wanted for it. And we tried to get them, because they dealt with land, we tried to get them, we're a 501c3, and I said, we can write you guys a big, nice tax write-off if you want to donate that. And so this guy talked to his dad about it, and all they wanted that money. So they sold it to some people from up north who will probably do whatever up north people do to land down here. And we have no land now that actually, from the old Vineyard Indian settlement, where our Vineyard Indian settlement is now down by Herod wasn't part of the original Vineyard Indian settlement. We bought that land back in, I think 1996. And so it's not too far from the homeland. But that's another thing, too, is the sacredness of land. I'm about finished here. The holiness of land is a hard thing to tell people about. Unless you're familiar with it and attached in a spiritual way to it, you're not going to understand it. And we keep telling people that way. Everybody keeps talking about the Garden of the Gods and blah, blah, blah. That's a holy place. That place is holy. It was to us when we was a kid, when there were no roads into that place. There was a man who would take us young boys up there on weekends, up there. And the first thing we were admonished was, don't talk out loud. Don't be yelling at each other. And don't be talking, picking up things with disrespect. And we actually listened to him. And now it's a big tourist thing. You know, it's a wonder they don't have snow cones and cotton candy down there. They have, in fact, every week during the summer, somebody falls off of those cliffs. We just had a woman fall off this week and died. But you can't tell people anything about respect that don't understand it. Somebody falls off of there at least once a week, sometimes more. They fall off of those cliffs. And the Forest Service, not being such a holy entity, will probably put a fence up around the edge of those rocks. And to keep people from jumping off or falling off or sliding off or doing something, they'll do something to make a mess out of that place. Yeah, it's a holy place. And you don't have to be, you don't have to have toilets everywhere up there. You don't have to have rock paths. You don't have to have all those things. You could be up there and you can look at things. What are you looking at when you're yelling and screaming around and throwing cans off the edge up there? What is happening? Well, disrespect. And those things can hear you. It's one of the things that we still have in our community. The ability to still hear those ancestors, or still to hear those things there. I don't ever go up there. I just can't. There's other places in the area that I do go to, but it'll probably have something, another horse riding bunch on it. Any other questions? I'm starting to. Yes, ma'am.
What hopes do you have for people gathering together this weekend?
What hopes do I have? I think that remains to be seen. What hope do I have? I'm excited about it. I'd say, I don't know if that's hopeful or not. I'm excited about people who have an affinity for the earth and for the land and for the water and for the lives of other human beings, for the lives of women and kids. I have an affinity for that. And I hope that that affinity translates into action of some sort. But I don't see any action happening from, like I say, marching on Washington or anything, because they just really, they don't care, I guess if you had, a million-man march, I don't know if anything good come out of the million-man march, to tell you the truth. Politicians and people without consciences don't care how much protesting you do. Generally speaking. That's not much of an answer for your question, but that's the best I can do. Anyone else? Anyone else with a question? Yeah, I wish I'd met you all before. I'd be taking a collection to help buy that land down there for us at Carver's Ridge. Yeah, we'd still like to get some of our land back. And we have people on our council now that I'm not a very good leader. In fact, I think of myself as being a terrible leader in terms of causing, that kind of goes in with your question, that there's just things that I just have found not within my power to effect in terms of a change. And I think a lot had to do, I don't even write poetry as much as I used to, because I understand that when I used to write, this poetry I used to write, that I did write, I thought of it in terms of talking to people who had a conscience. And that's not always true. People who have a conscience don't need to hear this anyway, really. Yes?
Would you be willing to share one of your poems with me?
Share a poem with you. Oh, yeah, I can do that. Oh, do you still have that, somebody still have that record in the, in your machine?
We can get it up for you, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to, it had a poem already on there. I was going to be like I was going to have it play in the background, and I was going to mouth it. Yeah, I've got a lot of files in here on state-recognized tribes. I'm going to have to read it without my glasses. I'm going to read this poem. Let's try it. There's a lady here tonight. I was going to play it on the record, but we couldn't find.
Wait, actually, I think we can actually. We're just going to swap out the audio. Which track was it?
The Leroy Jackson one was, it says 7 here, 07. Well, the reason I'm going to, this is one of my own personal heroes, and I sort of knew him, but what I'm impressed by tonight is that his sister is here. Oh, yeah, I can kind of see with these. What's that? Oh, I see. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and read this poem. It's called, the title poem to this selection of poetry here.
Sorry.
Damn, I almost hit the ground there. Damn. Well, that's not so much of a joke. About 2 weeks ago, I don't know if I should tell this. My old Buick that got wrecked for the second time, the people who picked it up found out that the speedometer that I couldn't get off my foot to release, and that I flipped over in a cornfield, and that it had been messed with. And that's not uncommon down here, especially in Saline County. Saline County has a great reputation for, you know, if you've got a state's attorney or somebody you want to do away with, you just take them into Saline County and they'll fall down a flight of stairs accidentally. And see, the thing about things that happen around down in here, if you're from here, you know what's happening. You know who's getting killed for what and everything, but people just learn to keep their mouths shut, you know, and let it go on. And I don't do such a good job of that, but I don't just deliberately put myself out there and say, shoot me. This title poem is called Left for Dead. It was, this section of poems came out in, here it is. This collection was published and recorded back in 1994 in Paris. And by the way, one of the few things in the public that I'm kind of proud of, this was selected as one of the, what was it? What?
Caldecott, maybe?
It was written up in the papers as one of the 400 greatest experimental hits in the history of music. experimental hits. I didn't know what that was, but somehow or another, I felt good about it, you know. But Left for Dead, after we came out with this, a lot of people started using that phrase, you know. In fact, a band, we were called the Left for Dead people when we were traveling around Western Europe, and that's what we became known for. And Tony Hymas, who's the composer of the music background for this, is a contemporary of, and other guys that were famous that I worked with, and I had no idea who they were because I never listened to that kind of music when I was growing up. There's people, there's Jeff Beck, that people know with his guitar music and everything, who doesn't like me very well, so he says, but I even have enemies in Europe. And Evan Parker, one of the greatest saxophone players you'll ever meet in your life, and I liked him a lot. Charlie Parker, there's people that were, you know, but I couldn't be impressed because I never created an idle mentality around those folks. And who I went to see when I was there in Paris was out to the graveyard to see Edith Piaf's grave. There was this man out there that stood out there, a very well dapper young man, not young, he's probably mid-late 50s. And he was there every time that I went, in years later, he'd still go out there. So he had some kind of mysterious connection with this Edith Piaf. And she, by the way, was the one, I wrote a poem for her after listening to her music at this friend of mine's house in upstate New York. I sat there all day and I got caught on to Edith Piaf, and I was just listening to her all the time. That voice just trapped me. And so I wrote a poem for her called Thanks to Edith Piaf or something like that. And you can impress the French very easily by mentioning Edith Piaf, because I kept getting called over to. And when you'd finish, when I'd read that poem in concert, when I'd perform that piece of work, people in the audience would stand up and applaud. I don't think they heard any of it, but they'd stand up and applaud, you know, in a rhythmic kind of way during the whole reading of that poem. And I thought, well, that's odd, you know. Now, this is a hard poem. I wrote it, I don't know, probably in the late 70s, early 80s. It's true. We Indians are part of the American dream. More than lives, more than faces on coins, more than names on maps, more than Jim Thorpe, Billy Mills, and aftermath tales of Ira Hayes and other Native veterans who vomited face down in 100 proof red, white, and blue, even Geronimo. And more than the Tall Chief sisters who pirouetted stages to world renown, more than Osage Carl Curtis who sub-reigned in the White House. There is always more, always another side that America will not hear. Even in apartheid, you guys are the ones who really got screwed, purges the conscience, the dark burden that colonials cannot justify by truth. It's true, Indians are part of the American dream, more than America will deal with, more than turquoise watch bands on the Santa Fe Plaza, more than the resplendent array of spangled fancy dancers who perform in public parks, more than leukemic oil wells in Oklahoma, more than the Lord's Prayer in sign language, sign-off time on TV, more than pottery shards, arrowheads, and graveyards, more than Ivy League schools that teach Bostonian accents, more than the MLA that dissects assimilation, quaint and colorful scenes from America's glorious past. More than the American dream, we are wordless eyes of wordless daily murders, suicides, land rip-offs, suicides, religious lies, suicides of Native patriots incarcerated by due process. America, your prisons brim with Native souls because our numbers are safe. And you may empathize loudly in South Africa, ethnic Russia, Afghanistan, but quietly on Turtle Island, regretfully. Besides, if it's not on TV, It doesn't exist. Not in America. We are wordless eyes that speak like looking glasses, moving screen threats of melting pots and manifest destiny, and our place in the American dream lingering like the memory that you had hoped to bury. Nyawat Miokans, welcome to my homeland, the western division of our homelands. And I think it's appropriate to maybe end with that tonight unless someone else has another question.